But Dan, you're here to shatter illusions and to provide information. We really cannot sing your the praises of your knowledge enough. So let's get right into it. You just go ahead and take us wherever you think we need to go.
This is what we have. We have a power structure, a cancer that's so extensive and so permeated with so many willing participants, and that's the key point. Those few at the top that really know what's going on, that are pulling all the strings, could not do this without the full cooperation of everyone down the ladder. And people who are literally, at this point, responsible for stripping the future from their own children. And we see a lot of political theater, Doug and Joe, don't we, about how much these politicians claim to care about newborns or unborns. But and I'm not saying they shouldn't care, they should. But do they really care when they are part of the systematic poisoning of all life on Earth, including those newborns, that they are participating in the cover-up of this toxic metal that's raining down on all of us? And we see the stats medically. We see it. I mean, we have autism has, again, statistically, from 1975 to 2014, the increase was over 10,000%. And now we have statistics from MIT stating it's going to be 1 in 2 in 10 years. We don't have 10 years, by the way. In regards to our biosphere and the state of the biosphere and the species extinction rate and the demise that we are seeing right now, the equation is so nonlinear. It's so extreme and so exponential. If we do not change course immediately, mathematically speaking, it's going to be game over very, very soon. Short-term human extinction. I fully accept that certain things are not necessarily directly in our control, and I don't live in fear at all. But I simply want to be found at my post doing what I'm supposed to be doing, whatever happens. But the Chinook salmon are collapsing in the Alaskan waters. You have 80% salmon collapse in the Columbia River and the tributaries. We have Mongolia has lost 80% of their food crops. China's about 25 to 30%. I mean, these are big headlines. What's going to feed the Mongolian people? And while we're watching Donald Trump and his theater and the rest of the theater and the political circus, if you will, all hell's breaking loose around the planet. And people truly need to stand back, assess the situation, shatter the delusion of normalcy bias, if you will. And I know you guys know what normalcy bias is. A lot of, perhaps some of the listeners don't know exactly what that means, but I hope people look it up. It's simply that when you've never experienced certain threats, you're sometimes not likely to accept them or even see them. And I know you guys know what the term is, but we have a society that's absolutely epidemic with normalcy bias because the stores are open, the stock market's going up completely artificially, but they just can't get their arms around the fact that the biosphere is imploding by the day. Well, the fish dives have certainly been occurring all over the globe, but the salmon collapse is relatively recent at this scale. Warming of the waters, the Eastern Pacific,
yes,
but it's becoming like bathwater. The theater that goes on to try to distract people from the fact that their biosphere is literally imploding, it's truly astounding. There's no connection to reality whatsoever. We have the thermal energy buildup, and right now, again, the heating of the planet is occurring at the approximate rate, mathematically, of 4 Hiroshima bombs per second, 400,000 a day. It's hard to get your arms around a planet that's heating at that rate. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. Again, I stress this with any dissemination I give, I stress, please don't believe me. Please investigate exactly what I say. Go to a search engine and search exactly what I just said. 4 Hiroshima bombs a second heating the planet. You'll find multitudes of articles covering that exact study. Thermal energy buildup in the oceans is the bottom line with the equation, because as I state often to try to make people understand the difference between the heat buildup in a cubic meter of seawater as compared to a cubic meter of air. A cubic meter of seawater contains 4,000 times more thermal energy than air. So as the climate engineers, and for your listeners, most of them probably know what this is, but again, they attempt to manipulate Earth's climate systems. All the major powers are involved. They're all colluding. The various major aspects of this manipulation involve saturating the atmosphere with electrically conductive, light-scattering particulates. Heavy metals and other elements are part of spray mix, So we have light reflection, light refraction, which is a stated goal of solar radiation management. One of the terms is used for geoengineering. But we also have the ability for the climate engineers to manipulate these particulates when they're exposed to radio frequency signals. And you've looked up on occasion, I'm sure on many occasions, and seen the rippled, perfectly uniform rippled effect in the clouds. And sometimes if you look at the right time, you'll see this rippled effect heading different directions, which is absolutely impossible meteorologically if you did not have a radio frequency involved. Have you ever seen that in the skies where you have this rippled effect even going opposing directions, and the radio frequency exposure is such that they repel each other? It tends to scatter them out. It tends to scatter rainfall in the same manner. If you have too many condensation nuclei, too many small particles, as rain is moving across California, this is typically what happens to us here. If they do allow moisture to move across us, it's heavily aerosolized, so it's heavily sprayed. And then with this radio frequency exposure, they can scatter those particulates, so it just distributes what would have been rain in certain locations into the widest possible uniform, featureless-looking sky imaginable, but no rain comes out. It stays dry. So you guys perhaps have seen some of these featureless skies. We've grown so used to, Doug and Joe, that we don't even recognize what a real cloud looks like anymore. If people would simply, again, stop dichotomously thinking, because a lot of people, even in the anti-climate engineering movement, want to believe that the only source of damage to the planet is climate engineering, and that's simply not true. Hold to that kind of conclusion, we create a big rift between the anti-climate engineering community and the climate science community. We need that rift to go away. We need to unite the tribes. Well, in the climate science community, which is horrifically in denial about this issue. And there's reasons for that. A lot of climate scientists are dying. Have you guys taken note of that? You have the frontline Arctic ice scientist, Peter Wedhams, that recently stated on the record he had concerns and suspicions about 3 of his colleagues that had recently died very anomalous, unfortunate deaths, climate scientists, all of them. And he was so beaten up for the statement that he later retracted it. But this is a man that's not prone to making such statements at all. And the fact that he said it should carry a lot of weight. And also we have other scientists from Greenland recently, that's the type of scientist that might be considered the type of person who would speak out. Died spectacularly. I think that was in January, February of this year in a very anomalous plane crash, the kind of thing you see in movies, of course. They're trying desperately to hide what's going on around the globe. And there's no question that more and more of these climate scientists understand the stakes, understand that their jobs, their careers don't mean anything, that if they don't deal with this issue, nothing else will matter. So we can speculate as to all these deaths, but if people search this out, in fact, there's a headline right now from one publication. Cambridge professor Peter Wedhams insists 3 scientists have been assassinated. That's a pretty strong headline, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say.
Going back over the last several years, there's been a dozen, maybe a dozen and a half. There's quite a few. Here's another headline, UK climate scientist. This is from the International Business Times, big publication. UK climate scientist Peter Wedhams feared assassination by death squad. Here we have, if we connect these dots, it's a little easier to see. And a lot of people have been trained to believe that the power structure, the media, is trying to convince them it's warming because they want carbon credits and, sham things like that, which at one time was true to a degree. They were really pushing the carbon credits, and of course that's just one more form of manipulation over the population. As time has progressed, as the gravity, the severity of what we face has magnified exponentially now, this is woven into the threats for the climate scientists right now. Now the power structure and the media they control are trying desperately not to convince the public it's warming to the degree it is. Yes, they talk about it. Can't not talk about it when we had temperatures in Iraq, I believe 6-7 days ago. We had a heat index of 165 degrees. So not an actual temperature. That's about 125 degrees with 50% humidity, but that heat index is still off the scale, and people can't survive at that index. So anyway, as conditions have gotten that severe, so they have to talk about global warming to a degree, but they are absolutely doing their best, especially in the case of the U.S. population, in the eastern half of the U.S., to convince that part of the population, which is the majority of the U.S. population, it's where a lot of the politics occur, that warming is not occurring. So what do we see when we look at GISS maps, global maps of deviation from normal temperature around the whole globe for the last 2 years? The only blue spot on an otherwise red planet, red meaning above normal temperatures, is the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48. The focus of geoengineered storms and jet stream manipulation again and again and again and again. And mathematically speaking, meteorologically speaking, you could not have such a scenario naturally. You couldn't have. Do you guys remember during the winter we heard over and over Boston snow, Boston snow, Boston snow?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember that? Oh, so I'm just pointing out that that's what we were shown, or we got shown the Buffalo snow too, and they trained snow into a tiny little sliver of land. Well, this is we watched it on radar. We could see them training and ice nucleating the flow of moisture they had across those lakes just to get those headlines in that one spot. And that impresses people. When they see all that snow, they don't care if it's one block of Buffalo. They just see the snow. They hate Al Gore. We all hate Al Gore. He's easy to hate. He's part of the power structure. But if we look at the events that they focused on, Boston snow, Buffalo snow, that when they engineer a cool-down event, and that's a shallow layer of cold on the surface, it comes from heavy ice nucleation. We have frequent flyers that note temperature rises of 20 degrees 1,000 feet off the deck. So they create these engineered events, and that creates the illusion of more cold than warm. And again, I'm weaving this back into climate engineering because here's the point to all of this. While they were showing the Boston snow, the cold readings here and there, they weren't talking about the fact that we were 90 degrees all through the west in the middle of winter, no snow, 14,000 feet up in the Sierras, nothing. Mount Shasta, 14,000 feet high. There was nothing on it for much of the winter. They don't talk about any of that. So they create this perception of the climate system by engineering a cool down in what amounts to 1/2 of 1% of the Earth's surface area. The eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 is about 1/2 of 1%, or 1/200th of the Earth's surface area. That's not much. The climate engineering, why would they do this? Because climate engineering has helped to contribute to this planetary meltdown. It's not mitigation. It's not helping. Climate engineering can only be considered weather warfare. There's nothing benevolent in climate engineering. It's about power and control, period. As they've done more and more damage, as they've toxified the planet, every life form on the planet, as the damage has mounted, they keep doubling down again and again and again. They just ramp the programs up more and more. And now they're trying as hard as they can to hide the fact these programs have helped to push us to the point where the planet's in total meltdown. I'm not saying it's the only cause, but I'm saying people need to consider climate engineering itself has contributed radically to disintegrating climate system. Science makes clear, the laws of physics makes clear, if you put particles in the atmosphere, you will destroy the ozone layer. You can't not destroy it. So while they're blaming it on spray cans, on CFCs, mathematically, most massive cause of ozone destruction by far is climate engineering. So back to the UV, that UV being as intense as it is, directly related to climate engineering. Now more thermal energy is penetrating because of climate engineering. So when I said they double down, that's exactly what they do. The more damage they do, weather warfare they've already been carrying out, the more they ramp the programs up to try to hide that damage, doing yet more damage. Again, it's imperative that we consider all the sources of damage to the climate. The climate science community is afraid to even go near the subject of geoengineering. Supported by the data, climate engineering is not the only cause of meltdown. Again, if you cutting down the forests, putting 4 billion gallons of hydrocarbon in the atmosphere a day, which is about 100 million tons, paving the planet. I mean, certainly I don't think any one of us could argue that that has to have an effect, and it does have an effect. But that being said, let's look at the fires. You guys see the fires burning everywhere, right? So if we look at how the chain reaction goes from the fires, let's tie that completely into climate engineering. You can't have less moisture in the atmosphere on a warming planet unless you have a factor that's not being acknowledged, and that factor is climate engineering. So these particulates, they radically disrupt the evaporation and the hydrological cycle. I would encourage your listeners to search for a film called Dimming the Sun by Nova. Shockingly good film, and certainly those filmmakers knew this was going on, although they couldn't admit to it. But to the forest fires, so you have a planet that should be experiencing more rain as the planet tries to respond to the warming and the damage done. It tries to cool itself. But now we have less rain globally. This is a direct result of climate engineering. But isn't it astounding to live in a society where something this big could be going on? And at this critical hour, and we are indeed at a critical hour that most don't yet realize the gravity of and the immediacy of. But climate engineering, this is where the paradox really sinks in. I mean, not only do we have these climate mitigation programs as if it's for the common good, destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle completely, contaminating the entire planet and every breath we take. Also, with renewable energy, decimating. These programs are decimating. They diminish wind, sun, and rain, all three the primary sources of renewable energy. Long story short, again, the effort being made to hide these programs, to give the public anything that would help or would cause them to not believe this is going on, massive effort, ongoing effort to hide this.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
It's happened over and over and over. I had a scientist contact me from Duke University, a lab manager, a lab that was funded by Monsanto. And of course, we have the foxes running the hen house across the board. She's livid about the climate engineering issue. After being taken into a room, she said, in other words, for a second time, and told, you touch this issue again, there'll be consequences. That's the last I've heard of her. I'm not sure if anything ever happened to her. She may have just decided that it was time to shut up. I'm betting on it. We are not just expendable to them, but now we are a rapidly increasing liability. And just as Mr. Brzezinski said, it is much easier for them to, with the technology available now, to cull than to do anything else. But I need to make this point clear. These programs are not just about eugenics, not at all. They're very complex. Weather warfare is a huge part of it. Part of it is they're simply trying to save their own skin, but making it worse in the process. They're rolling the dice. They're doubling down again and again and again. Multiple layers to the onion, multiple agendas. If you can't hide climate engineering, you're going to have a global population that's going to go ballistic because of people like Kissinger. And one more quote from Kissinger, by the way, and I'll leave with that. And this is also part of climate engineering, and this is where it's very complex. They're controlling the food supplies. They're controlling the energy flows back to the hydropower, the wind power, the solar power. They're controlling all that to some degree with climate engineering, as I mentioned. So here's a direct quote from Kissinger. He who controls the food supply controls the people. He who controls the energy can control whole continents. He who controls the money can control the world. Henry Kissinger, 1973. Can there be any doubt that that's going on right now? I mean, can there be any doubt whatsoever? They have mandatory vaccines happening in California. And I mean, we're in a literal right now, right here fight for life. And I know people that are still going golfing, going on a cruise.
You said, we've got at the outside maybe 10 years, okay? What do we do? I mean, I know that we have to expose and intervene, but how do we, given that short period of time, we got to get on our posts like right now, man, and we got to start sounding the alarm bells. But
we have, again, those people who have been trained, who have been told that it's normal. You see nothing in your sky one day and horizon to horizon trails the next day. The greatest gift we have is our sense of reason, and we should use that and not turn it off. And the human race has largely turned it off, especially the U.S. population. It's not normal with similar atmospheric conditions to have such anomalies. This is absolutely positively spraying being done, period. You have a system that's like a cancer, an unimaginably huge cancer. And Doug and Joe, does a cancer intend to kill its host? I would argue no. A cancer simply intends to proliferate. This is no different. We have people that are so invested in this juggernaut of insanity that they won't stop. They will not stop until, now we get to the next question, what do we do? Until enough people treat this issue with the priority that it deserves, as if their head's on fire, to help us get this issue to the light of day. If we do that, military personnel, and there's a lot of great people in the military, good people that are waking up to the lie, are waking up to the fact that they've been used to a degree that can scarcely be imagined by those in power. And this is easy to verify. I mean, from the experiments being done on our own soldiers, nuclear fallout they've been exposed to depleted uranium ammunition. We had 200,000 Iraqi vets from the first Iraq War with Gulf War syndrome being exposed to depleted uranium. And it doesn't take much to talk about supporting the troops. It takes a little more to actually support them. We need, back to how do we fix this? How do we expose climate engineering, which is the greatest single leap we could take in the right direction? If we don't stop it, it's game over, period. The planet can't respond. The planet is trying to swim in a straitjacket. Can you swim in a straitjacket with your ankles tied and you can't swim? You drown. The planet can't respond to the damage done. It can't. It's encased in a cocoon of toxic metal particulates. If climate engineering continues, mathematically speaking, we have no chance, even on the near-term horizon, no chance. And the current die-off should be proof enough of that. If we could get this to the light of day, if enough of our military brothers and sisters could be made to realize what they're a part of, what they're being made to do, has nothing to do with freedom, democracy, the preservation of the country, has only to do with a power structure that now is trying to deal with a population that it knows not just expendable, but a liability to. If a population wakes up, it's a liability. And to back that up, let me give you a quote from former U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski. This is a direct quote from Mr. Brzezinski. Major world powers, new and old, also face a novel reality. While the lethality of their military might be greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at historic lows. To put it bluntly, in earlier times it was easier to control 1 million people than to physically kill 1 million people. Today, again, this is a direct quote, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. We are all being slow killed right now. These particles will kill us. They are killing us. And the demise comes quicker at the end. As your body starts to break down, it happens much more rapidly. That's a mathematical, scientific, lab-proven fact, absolute fact. If we bring this to light, I believe enough of our military brothers and sisters will refuse to cooperate.